Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are in the world today, you're in the new way. I'm Dr. Lenny Time, and I figured that before Wonderland got started for the day, I might do a little bit of rambling on group theory. Group theory is the idea that people working in groups can follow as little structure as possible and still make their group effective if they work diligently and stay focused on task. It's real easy to do as a group of one. And right now, I am a group of one. I am Dr. Lenny Time. I am also a group of one of many humans who are said to be 8 billion in population on the surface of the earth. But I have some reasonable doubts about how that all works. But as one individual in the one collective of humans, I've now defined what is human scale. It's that one-to-one relationship. When you get done with one on human scale and you get done with one on individual scale, what happens is that you're ready to go to two. If you actuate two by adding to your one, you have to bring in another person. And when you do that, that interaction happens at a frequency that is a melt of the frequency that you normally vibrate at and the one that the person you are with is vibrating at. So a group of two logically finishes their conversation and goes back to a group of one. And then you make another new group of two, and so forth and so on. The terminology for a group of two made from ones who are meeting for the first time is a fringe encounter. The fringe encounter is something that I got from Grizz, and he'd have to tell me where he got it from. But it makes sense that the first time you meet somebody new and have a one-on-one conversation, you're crossing some serious battleground and developing let's say, a lower frequency link because it's lower to the ground level. We're all actors acting in the role within the LARP. And so it works out really, really well to just do what you do and be good at what you do and don't expect help, but talk about it when you're in your group of two instead of group of one, and get allies who are going to help you on your mission while you help them on their mission. After a group of two, when you're expanding the in-breath, you get to a group of three, and the dynamics of a group of three change the frequency again, different from the group of two. And it depends on if the three people in the group of three each have a one-to-one relationship as a group of two. That's a 6-time multiplier of the frequency. Whereas if two of the people know each other and one person is new, there is still good frequency, but it's not as high as if everybody already knows each other. But it's not quite a fringe encounter for the new person yet, because he's got to deal with two people who he will eventually deal with in a one-on-one. And so by the time you get to three people in a room, having a legitimate conversation who know enough to not trigger each other and how to carry the conversation, that's a very, very valuable group to have. That's sort of the optimum group at the first order of group theory. When you add a fourth person, it really doesn't affect the group of three people. And it's nice to bring in a fourth new person and then start the routines of one on one exchanges, because it's those first one on one exchanges that really introduces you to the people who are going to have your back as the game progresses. And we're all going to develop our lineage based on who we actually have met and what their social, I say social rank, but this is a LARP and it's not like a social credit score. It is a way of synchronicity, compromise, and implicit negotiation. Absolutely, Mills. You're right on topic, even though that was 5 minutes ago. You see, time works in funny ways. And by doing this as a solo narrative before the Wonderland actually creeps on, it may turn out that we never have a Wonderland today because it didn't transpire. But whatever way it works is how it works. And the things we do here in the now, where we are cognitive beings, really make for a basis of where we can go from here on a timeline that supposedly hasn't been cut yet. And I say supposedly because we're going to talk about time again and again and again, because I don't really think we have it right. I mean, there's clock time, and clock time is good for use in scientific experiments because it's frequency based and the repetition is there in the iterations necessary to get a good signal to noise ratio. And let's face it, most of what we're dealing with is noise, and there ain't too much signal. So our group of 3 or 4 expands to 5, and there's a big change in dynamics when the group hits 5. And if the 5 people in the group aren't comfortable with each other, it's still a first order group. But if they are comfortable with each other, it has the makings of a third order group. So let's go to our research. Clock had 10 hours a day and 100 minutes to an hour. I think that would work. The only problem is that it doesn't fit to the reality of other people, and time is about coordinating. We are working with a broken clock, and if we can take time and call time 1 the minutes, hours, seconds on a clock going into days and science time, where you can divide something by and have per minute or per second, and all of the accumulated knowledge time that we have, what we do is we announce that we are indeed members of the Virtually Not Alone network. And because there are now 5 people, me and 4 watchers, our dynamic has shifted from first order to second order. Because we've shifted at 5, the Fibonacci count counts 1 for 3, 1 for 5, and so the next 3 targets are 8, 13, and 21, and they represent 2, 3, and 4 in normal counting. So we will look at the group theory of this episode later, but now that we're in a group of 5, we are becoming a functional group. And a functional group is a higher order than a meeting group. And so those functional groups we're going to call second order groups. A second order group has to start at a minimum of 5, but that includes a group of 3 as the basis for the group of 5 as the first one in Fibonacci on the reset. And this reset is going to be important because when we go from 3 to 5 to 8 to 13 to 21, it's like going from 1 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 5. And so that parallel of first order to second order allows us to use symmetry in the mechanisms of the group. And so group symmetry, I got to change that one. Group symmetry is going to be different in its nature, but if we use the same patterns to begin with, we'll find that we save a lot of work because the patterns are the same at every different scale. And so we have our V&A followers, and maybe we'll even figure out how to get emojis here before too long. And time works in parallel, and magic works in perpendicular. And magic allows you to cross parallels and be in multiple places at once. But the idea of you being in multiple places at once is you are always here in the now, and the now is on 3 different timelines. And so you are functioning in the same paradigm, but slightly different circumstances initially, which will gradually bleed to very different circumstances as the decision tree breaks apart and collapses following the same Fibonacci cycle that I'm explaining for group theory. So our second order group has 5 people, and the error is plus or minus 1 person. So 4 people can be considered a second order group if they've shrunk from 5, but not if they've grown from 3. They have to grow to 5 organically before 4 can be part of 5. And it's the same way with 7 and 9 as part of 8. But the sum of the numbers is the order of the highest Fibonacci in the curve. And I think I'm still making sense in the coordinated effort to talk to myself, a mere 1/3 away from the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything with it. Absolutely. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is right on. And he likes the description. A lot of games on different scales happening simultaneously. Good, good. Because I think everything is normalized to human scale, and that humans always believe that they are on the scale that matters. And we have bigger scales like planetary scale and universal scale and galactic scale that are much, much bigger than we are, that can be fractal to human nature and therefore work on the same paradigms, but all normalized to a 80-year human lifetime, which I guess we're going to bounce out of here pretty soon, because the change in frequency associated with the change of planetary order is such that only people who have the right spirits and minds are going to come through at the frequency level required to be part of the next Earth. And we're all hoped to be there, and we'll all be part of some Earth. But the trick is to get there and then differentiate and not worry about the levels of getting there until we've actually there and see who's with us. So everybody here as a an individual human on a scale of 1 always has say in whatever group they're in of higher order. And so as you move to second order and get into a functional group, you can veto what goes on if you don't like the direction of the group. And in human scale, you have to have that veto power because otherwise it isn't going to work. So getting the second order in play is one of bringing groups together and attempting to have enough enough juice to keep the vibration level high and the frequency level low so that you're grounded, but we're actually recharging our batteries by exchanging information. And now we move to a group of 2 as I add Alice to the stage. And we are in the pre Wonderland warm up, and I have been talking about group theory. So we are actually on air and live streaming to YouTube and have an audience that is talking in the chat. And so, welcome to Wonderland.
Thanks, Doc. Yeah, I heard about charging batteries, and that's what I was doing, charging my batteries. So I'm here fully charged.
Good. Mills asks if it's a sustainable frequency. And the answer is yes, but the frequency will vary independently of time. We define time 1 as clock time, which belongs to calendars and setting meetings and organizing science data and things in the real world. But time 2 is the time that we spend in our own lives. And that shrinks or expands depending on how much we're doing with our time and how much time we perceive we have. And so Upcycle says, Alice.
Hi.
Upcycle is in some of my other areas that I talk to online, and we might bring him into Wonderland at some point along down the road. But Mad Max is supposed to be here, and we missed our meeting over the weekend where we were going to talk about jubilees. But I got to thinking on my own about the topic of jubilees, and the problem that I see is defining what is available for redistribution and making off limits what's not. And if we're going to redistribute all the wealth of the system, to me, that means the assets of the banks, which include the corporations and a lot of things that will dissolve as soon as we disperse them to the people. But a lot of people get the impression that they're going to give up their stuff that they've collected as part of what's going on. And I don't really see that as a problem unless people think that everybody's stuff is fair game if it's a jubilee. And so I want to, just for my own benefit, define the terms of what jubilee is and do it in a Wonderland sense so that we can enact it and thus it be. Whereas if we tried to make it for the world as it is, we're going to get into little bitty arguments about nitpicky things that miss the main point. Whose assets belong to whom? How much do we have to put aside for real infrastructure repair? How much do we put aside to house, clothe, and feed all the people and get them connected network wise to communications of entertainment and education? And what things are personal and off limits and could be duplicated but not taken, if you know what I mean?
I see that the Jubilee is a forgiveness of debts. So your your assets, the only thing that's going to disappear is the money's part of it, the debt part of it, the numbers in a bank account, right? The yeah, and how much you owe. So um, this is just an
That sounds like people that don't owe get screwed because they don't have debt to be forgiven.
okay, and yes, it could sound like that to the people that don't owe, definitely. But understanding that the what we already have built in the world is more than enough. It's more than enough houses. Although I would say that in some areas like the third world countries, it is there is some infrastructure that needs to be built for sure, and there will be some things that are still built. Okay, look at what we have right now in Arizona, some of the 3D printing houses. I don't think that they're the best quality. It's just started, right? But it's showing that the robots or printers can build these houses, right? And put these together. So it's just a step one in the process of the technology. And phase one always is superseded by another better way. The more that people are free, they're going to be more creative and develop new ideas in engineering, in architecture, in all different ways. So, but back to the debts, and you say the people that are getting screwed that don't owe, right? Say somebody, say somebody maxed out their credit, right? Maybe that's a bad reference. But let's go back to people that don't owe. All right, what do they want? What would make them feel like they were? Um,
Well, look at it this way. Well, you're a landlord and you've got tenants who haven't paid you in years. Their debts are going to be settled to you, but we've got to get rid of the landlord landee system completely. The whole thing is based on generating money out of people. And that's just like wringing us dry. So if we're going to replace people with robots and take the work that can be done manually and mechanically and give that to the robots, we're not going to have to start with as much of a basis for what we need. But if we take the whole pot of money that we're going to get and we're talking about closing down criminal enterprises and confiscating their stuff and redistributing it to be a real equalizing of the people and not just relief of debt. The trick is that the operating system will have to work more like the Federation of Planets in Star Trek operated, as opposed to how countries operate in this world. But if it's going to be a peaceful world with a people led governance, we here in Wonderland are obligated to work that out so that it can become a possibility in the realm of things. But we're not trying to get there from where they are now because nobody's ever going to agree with it because they're all worried about whether their stocks are going to crash. And we know that they will, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to go out and sell all my stocks right now because all that would do is cause a panic. And I have an understanding that when it changes, the values that people have are going to be true values, both for what we hold for ourselves and what we expect of others. And so if each person can just find their harmony and be in a place where the work they do fulfills them and they don't have it linked to getting paid or any salary of a sort, except for merit bonuses, maybe. But everybody should be housed, fed, clothed, cleansed, etc. And that set of money for taking and caring for the people could be 1/3 of the whole big balance that we're going to be distributing. Another third of that balance can be set aside for all infrastructure repairs all over. And we could build train systems in the United States like they have in Europe so that people can actually get from places by train. And that'll reduce the number of cars immensely. And we can make it so that Europe can have natural gas that heats the homes of people without paying 1/3 of their salaries to get heating, because the whole thing is over. But if we get out of that thought system here in Wonderland and we just design the systems that we're going to need because we know we're going to need them, we don't have to replace anything. It'll all obsolete itself when enough people climb on board.
That's right. It's like a tipping of the scales, where right now the side is that the people are for sale, and the idea of people being for sale is going to tip where they're no longer for sale.
Yeah, we are not for sale, but the stuff we do is important enough that we should be able to earn better livings by doing what we do as opposed to just maintaining livings. But I think that the whole thing is going to flip over and we're going to go through a period where we got to do just what we got to do, because living won't be easy with side A fighting with side B and us trying to stay out of their way.
Well, we already have communication. We have, yes, we have communication devices and apps, many, 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 many of them, right? And so when the communication is going to turn into, hey, we need some people for this over here. And when all of these corporations are dissolved, there's going to be a lot more free people that are going to want to contribute to society in a way that they never have before, because we all have a human need of contribution. So in some way, shape, or form, people will get involved. They won't know where yet, but yeah, it it is going to be like that. I see that too, and I see that it's going to be in a similar way to when the pandemic was announced, when they announced a stay-at-home order, kind of, although it'll be different from that. It'll be a shock to the world, and and yeah, people will be surprised. It'll change their daily habits, and yeah, just give them a reset.
Yeah. And when it resets, it won't reset to the same old thing. It'll reset to just a base system where we know what we're talking about and we do the right thing because it's the right thing. And sort of like Wonderland, where everything ends up being the right thing as long as you do it. Oh, let's see. Curious about thoughts on a Walden 2 style needs based compensation model. Oh, not the place to do it here in Wonderland, but we will think about that and talk about it at a later time, Mills. It's a good thought. See, I don't know about the world anymore. I've sort of left the building, and each time I get dragged back into that building, it seems further and further off from my natural intuition and common sense. And so I can see where the Mad Doctor Time can be the Mad Hatter once again, but it really addles the brain to try and create reality out of what is presented as reality. And so I don't know. I think that I think there's a lot of good people who need our support. But the first thing that each of us needs to do is be there for themselves and forgive themselves of past grievances that they've been carrying on because they were taught that they're supposed to feel guilty about certain actions that are just weighing the individuals down. And there's a lot of people out there who want to make rules for other people but don't follow the rules themselves. And I think we're going to need to have reward systems based on being able to reward people for participating and at the different orders have different levels so that we can tell how people's contributions make a difference and just redo everything and decide if the old wheel is as good as the new wheel. In some cases, we might go back and take some stuff that we needed, but you never know. I see Max has joined us. Now, even though he's no longer pictured, I've learned that for him to communicate, I have to have him on the stage.
Yes, give me just a moment and I will get all pictured up and such.
That's okay. People can use their imaginations about what you may or may not be looking like right now. And you know, if it were easy to insert a little photograph in so that instead of having the circle with the gray thing in the middle, I could actually put up a photograph of something, that would be kind of cool because I'd rather have people looking at my cats than a picture of me.
Yeah, I could understand that. So yeah, sorry I'm late. It's a +3 day today. It's interesting. The Oregon weather has been wild. Yesterday was scorching, and then today it's like almost shivery. It's really back and forth for July.
It can get real hot real quick this time of year. It doesn't take more than a couple hours of sunshine to peel away what's left of the chemtrail clouds and put hot sun on everything.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
So
that's true.
we were talking about the Jubilee, which I know is one of your favorite topics at the moment. And we were thinking that we're going to confiscate all the wealth of banks, corporations, and whatnot and redistribute it out to the people, with a third going to supporting the people, a third going to infrastructure, and a third that we haven't even begun the conversation of what else our governance should be providing besides food, shelter, clothing, education, entertainment, and all the like.
So,
Do you think
go ahead.
government needs to provide entertainment?
No, access to though. I mean, really, instead of everybody paying their own individual internet bill, Why not just have the government pick up the bill and everybody has free internet?
Well, it's a infrastructure that's already been developed, and I see that the more that it is the bigger cost to a lot of the infrastructure. The infrastructure is actually just the how to monetize on it, right? So if you take the monetization part of it out, you lose a struggle or the cost to the infrastructure.
Well, it would be easy to redistribute the money we set aside for infrastructure back to other uses once the infrastructure was there. But I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure that we're dealing with now that is either archaic or bombed out or never was there in the first place, that a lot of bad decisions made because of the monetization of everything need to be changed. But since we're not working to get here from there, we're already here. We don't have to worry about those problems affecting how people do things because we're just creating a way, and the way that gets to where they're going will be different because we know they can't get here from there. Good afternoon, Nashama. How are you?
Good, good. I'm well, I'm alive, and I'm breathing, which is very nice. How are you guys?
It's those life that matter.
Oh, you got cut out there, Alice. What did you say?
Oh, I said it's just the little things that matter.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What are we talking about today? What's the topic in Wonderland?
Topic in Wonderland is that if we get to start over with a jubilee and we start over from scratch and don't take the systems but confiscate the ill-gotten gains and put it into a pool and distribute it as jubilee, how's that supposed to work, and what things should be taken care of by the pot of money before it gets distributed, and what sort of things should every human get, like housing, food, roof, connection to the internet, all different things that we could think of that would go into that. Whatever that nut is should be set aside so that nobody owes anything, and we've delinked occupations from living, not necessarily from standard of living, but from basic living.
For the purposes of this conversation, how are we defining Jubilee?
Why don't you take that one, Alice?
Okay, so Jubilee, that's a great question, because Jubilee comes from the Jewish tradition, I see. And so it's forgiveness of debts. And maybe you have more of an explanation, actually, Nahama, that would...
I'm just going to look up the Hebrew word so I can recognize it. Hi, Max. Oh, Yovel. Yovel. Okay. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, Yovel is not currently practiced in the land of Israel, although Shemitah is. Shemitah is when the land is rested every 7 years. And so the 7th year, the farmers, they have a ceremony. Here it was, oh gosh, was it 20? Oh, well, the years are bunching together, but it was very cool. It was a few years. Was it 2021 or 20? Anyway, whenever it was, they have a whole ceremony, and say some prayers and sing some songs and say goodbye to the land and let it rest for the year, and that replenishes the soil. And I think it was 2020 because it was a bit of a challenge for some of the farmers because it definitely was a leap of faith for them because of lockdowns and all of this stuff, and all of people's income was rather uncertain at that time. And so it was a real sacrifice to say, yes, I'm going to keep Shemitah and I'm going to have complete faith that everything is going to be fine. And, it all worked out for the most part. But Yovel, I think, is it traditionally every 50 years? Jubilee.
Well, yeah, that's colloquially what it's said is every 50 years, but it's every 7-year cycle. So it's like the 7-year cycle you were just talking about. The seventh one of the 7-year cycles makes it 49. So people just say 50, but the traditional one, as far as I know, is 7.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that would be very cool to practice again. I don't know about imposing it on anyone or confiscating anything. Those words I'm a little concerned about. But I don't know that all the farmers here keep Shemitah. I know a lot of them do.
So the farmer, yeah,
I keep having Alice's mic cut out. I don't know if it's on my side or what.
Yeah, I can't hear you either, Alice.
Try again.
okay. So can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just a little bit breakup, but I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, it seems to be Neshama's mic. So I'll mute you while Alice is talking and then bring it back on when she stops.
Gotcha. Sorry about that.
Okay, Alice.
Okay. What was I going to say? Oh, it was in response to the compensation. Okay. So the oh no, it was in response to the farmers. Okay, the land, the farming and the land. And you said they'd let it rest. And so every 7 years, plants like the poppy seed are great plants to regenerate the soil. And so instead of just letting it rest or forgiveness of debts, this regeneration in order to really do the regeneration or the real healing comes from the imposing of something else that can bring the nutrition back. And so this is the farmers in the soil. If you wanted to look up the poppy plant and see the regeneration, this would be the same kind of idea of doctrine, because in order to regenerate our human lives again, give life back to people, we need to bring in something else rather than just let it rest. Well, and maybe it is just the rest, but the evening of the playing field is more like it, where I am cutting out. Okay, so I'll do more listening. Okay, and hopefully you heard some of that. And
I heard the regenerative powers of the poppy, and there's a bunch of other regenerative plants. And I believe the tradition of the concept of the rest of the soil is resting it from producing producing value out of the ground. Instead, let the land grow, not be empty, but just grow things that the land grows, as opposed to growing things for yourself from the land. But when it comes to like the greater concept of a jubilee. I don't see a jubilee and a great reset as the same thing. From my understanding, the tradition of the jubilee was pretty foundational for a long time, because if you keep that 50-year cycle of jubilee within any given size of community, it allows the community to reset and resettle and then grow again. I think the concept of that these corporations even or governments even have very much wealth is kind of, it seems to me they have power and not wealth, because I don't want the debts of the corporations. I don't really want their buildings. Some, like Doc was saying, half the infrastructure is trash. Just an opportunity to create from a level starting point. I really don't need any distribution personally. No infrastructure would be fine with me. That's the jubilee that I would like to see, just the halting of the wheels of industry.
Can you give a couple of examples of?
That's so weird. A couple of examples of, I didn't hear what you said, sorry.
Industries.
Oh, the Gap. Let's see, would be another good example. The Ford Motor Company. Let's see, would be another good example. Nike. I mean, I guess the Nike factories or the Nike headquarters is pretty cool. You could turn it into a badass like community center. But other than that, like, I don't want sweatshops in China making cheap shoes. I don't see who that helps in any way, shape, or form. Like, I don't think we really need to repurpose much other than the actual infrastructure itself that's no longer being used, and then just use it correctly or use it for a creative purpose.
If we decouple work from just being able to have a living, and we use part of a reset to sort of put a floor underneath the playing field, the other thing to do would be putting a ceiling on top of the playing field and making it so that the executives can't, the people who are in charge of getting things done don't make all the profits from all the workers that they employ, that there's a flattening of the incentive reward scale so that people are rewarded for just doing good things instead of rewarded for chasing just money.
I think that scale of, or I think flattening that financial feedback curve incentive is probably the most crucial portion. It's completely perverse incentives to have a handful of corporate executives fighting for multi-million dollar jobs. That shouldn't even, all that does is incentivize consolidating of power. And so then what are you going to find? The most power seeking individuals. Then what are you going to have? The most resources in the hands of the most power seeking individuals. It doesn't incentivize any good behavior whatsoever.
I agree with you. It incentivizes psychopathy.
And people are relatively basic creatures in the sense that they follow their incentives. Like, I do what I'm trying to make my life better. So I take whatever I consider better and I look for what could get me to that betterness. It's pretty straightforward. And so orchestrating that incentive structure to incentivize like community involvement would be far better than seeking power consolidation. So that the positions having the biggest effect on the community are the positions with the most rewards baked into them. And that way the reward cycle goes back into the community from which the reward comes from.
And I wonder why people think that they need a reward system such as that. Is it just because we've been conditioned into it in the past?
I think there's something inherent about it, because a kid will clean his room to get a treat. Like, I think there's something fundamental about the inherent reward seeking of just go. If you find an apple tree, you get rewarded with apples. Like that simple.
I think part of the rewards that people would get is the release of pressure from feeling the need to have to do anything. But I don't think most people could sit on their hands and do nothing. And so the reward is the freedom to control your own time. And that's something that most people don't have right now. They're always under the gun to make enough money to pay to be able to do what they do. And if that wasn't a pressure, we'd need to build an infrastructure just to give people creative tools to do what they can do if they're creating. So I could see whole reformations or new formations of areas of society based on what our needs are when we get down the road. But I do not want to change the way it is to the way we're designing it. I want to design it without that pressure, because if we try and link it to what people expect already or how the rewards of this system are played out, we're doing ourselves a disservice. So there might be other things we need to set up, like what are the regulations of industry, so that if you are building something for someone else, how do you get your raw materials, and what's the price point, even though there's no real price. And if we're going to treat ecosystems like they should be and get them to be totally mature, we're going to need things like tree farms to produce wood and other things. So we'll see how it all goes. But the idea of what we're doing in Wonderland is envisioning what could be without the preset preconditions. But I don't know if it's human nature to do things that aren't chasing the greed, because that's what everybody learned from the time they first started going to school, was how to chase.
And this is why I see it as a complex solution, that it all has to happen at the same time, because I see that the people are only living in certain areas because of the opportunity to make money. Okay. So people will reevaluate where they are and why they're there, and a lot of locations will be changed. So with that, in order to change your location in the old system, it's normally a selling of a house, a big move. It's another stimulation of economy. I see that this was brought in on purpose or the whole COVID pandemic and people wanting to change their location in order to stimulate the economy, having different rules and regulations in different places so that people could decide, hey, this might be better. The grass is greener on the other side, right? And they wanted a big movement of people in the world for that specific reason. They're trying to take a stick and poke the economy to get it moving again. Oh, Doc disappeared. Maybe he'll be back.
All right, so I think this is where part of it comes into play with the idea of robotics hitting a self-sustaining. I'm using robotics really generally, hitting a self-sustaining circle, I guess, however you want to call it, where the robots themselves can mine the necessary amount of minerals in order to perpetuate the necessary amount of mechanics and technology. Because I see that as basically mining, whether it's natural gas, oil, or raw materials, as the most inhumane job that I can think of. That's fundamental to, like, right now, the phone I'm talking into has cobalt in it that was mined by a slave in the Congo. Terrible working conditions, horrible karmic points, everything about it. Now, from my perspective, given like the situation that I was put into, I would rather be having this conversation than not. I'm not going to fly to the Congo and fight a warlord myself. That's just not my skill set. So we're working on a different way of developing things. But there's something about that raw. The tree one is not so. That one's a little bit easier for me to wrap my mind around, just because I've grown plants before and I've cut down a tree with an axe before, and it doesn't take a lot of raw materials to make an axe head, and an axe head will last a very, very, very long time if it's well maintained. So the having wood as a resource is easier for me to wrap my mind around, because like in Japan, old school building techniques, like they didn't use any nails or anything. They would just make complex cuts on the corners of the joints and then use locking wood pins to lock the joints from being able to move. All that can be done with almost no minerals. But all the jobs seem fun except for mining, basically. Like, it seems like they could all be play if they're done in the right proportion and not in stress. I love gardening. I love carving stuff out of wood. Some people really love blacksmithing. All this stuff makes sense except the mining. I've never met somebody other than rockhounds that like to go see if they can find a crystal, that wants to just dig for days on end to find little chunks of nothing.
Okay,
We'll just let the dwarfs do it.
in
There you
the
go, problem solved.
in the garbage dumps, there is so much raw materials in there that mining seems to be that it could be obsolete because it could reuse the materials that are in the garbage dumps.
I would agree, but you'd still have to mine the garbage dumps, and that sounds like just as bad of a job. Like, I've seen the slums that they have in the east, where all the shipments of the West trash just dump out in big trucks, and there's dozens of people trying to scramble to get the most valuable things out of the trucks as they drop. It can't be like that. That's why I see like the robotics thing as being kind of crucial to this, unless we want to go back to a much simpler time where we're not using things like the internet and stuff like that, which I think would be still completely doable. But if we're going to continue this type of lifestyle, I feel like robotics has to hit a perpetual motion.
I think that if we're going to continue this type of lifestyle, we're not going to be around very long. But the idea of free energy and being able to create energy out of the 0 point has been buried for long enough that when it comes out, it'll seem like it's energy out of nothing. But we're going to have to rethink a lot of what we think we know, because all our science right now, at least in the hard sciences, is based on the absence of an ether. And I think that the latest information I have about how plasmas work, the ether could be described as a universal plasma in a way. I also think that our social sciences have really done us a disservice by not measuring some function of spiritual energy that goes along with space and time, because space and time are derived concepts from Einstein's work, and it dumped out a whole lot of work that had been previously done under terms like alchemy, which was more of a universal science of everything, and got pigeonholed into the belief that it was the basic trappings of chemistry, but it really wasn't. And it's funny because I seem to be about 10 or 15 years ahead of time sometimes. And I remember in 2006, 2007, when I ran across Walter Russell. And Walter Russell was this guy who had invented another periodic table that was based on vibrational frequency and followed sort of a snake rhythm. And he was also this incredible artist that had done statues and busts. And he had done busts of several presidents, and he had done something for the Mark Twain Museum that had 17 different statues of Twain, and just all sorts of incredible stuff. His book, The Universal One, will blow people's minds when they read it, but he set up a school in Virginia that actually now puts together real nice copies of the Universal One as their fundraising mechanism. And I think that that's what we're going to find, is that if we can eliminate the need to fundraise and make it so that all you have to do is present what you want to do and you have the resources to be able to do it on a worldwide basis, so much would be done by people just having the resources to play with their thoughts. And the hard work can be done mostly by the robots or by people who go into the defense sector, who need to learn discipline and can do difficult jobs as a function of that discipline training. Because I think we'll still need a defense, even though one would hope that worldwide there's no offense offered.
And that's another one of those things where it's so obvious how perverse the incentives are in the current system. Because with all of our military budget that we have here in America, there's some really strong memes and jokes about like mopping up the rain, flipping the rocks over, things that you have to do when you're in basic training. It's like, hey, go take all these bag of sand and put them over here, and then later put that bag of sand and put it over there, intentionally, as just a way to keep the guys busy because the base is way over maintained. But we can't manage to use that exact same amount of labor, discipline, well-trained individuals to come and help any of the infrastructure. Now, I get there's an Army Corps of Engineers, but I'm talking about just simple, like, let's just clean the trash up out of a park instead of flipping rocks on the Army base. Pretty simple. Like, we already have the manpower there to do it. It's just literally designed to make sure it has no impact on civilian life, so that all those resources, we get none of the benefit of all those resources, all go somewhere else to hypothetically defend us from a hypothetical something else. And that's where I do see like the transition being potentially pretty fluent, because a lot of the systems in place can be repurposed. The main one that I get stuck on is mining, because I think the mining that we do is horrible. Like Alice is saying, like repurposing the garage dumps makes a lot of sense, because so much of the materials that we're looking for are in those dumps already. But I think that the human power, what that whole concept of about 10% of your time goes towards doing a job that has more to do, like with doing chores. That's the best way I can think to do it. About 10% of your time goes to doing community chores. I think is a pretty solid structure, and it maths out quite well, in terms of people still being creative and doing their projects and all their trade and everything. But 10% of the time, somebody is unclogging the toilets that nobody wants to unclog, or any given dirty job.
I think at the core, in my opinion, comes down to values. I mean, why the military exists, like those guys carrying the sand back and forth, is effectively just money laundering, you know, and using violence to do the same thing. We've just chosen violence as a great tool for money laundering, unfortunately. I'm feeling that very personally in my life. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. So when we talk about okay, I'm having a little bit of a hard time with this conversation because of the word we. But I'm going to try to get over that. Just disclaimer, anytime anyone says we, I'm generally not including myself, but I am including myself in the discussion. I tend to work bottom up, not top down. So we're having a conversation about systems. That's okay. But that's also a little bit of a challenge for me because I work bottom up, generally speaking. What did I want to say, Max? Oh yeah, so I mean, I do think it's about values, and incentive and reward are, you know, they move in the direction of the values. I don't see incentive and reward as inherently bad, nor do I see them as anything to get rid of. Just like hierarchy exists in our species, you can't get rid of it. You can artificially mess with it, but like it exists. Someone is stronger than the other person. Someone is faster than the other person. I don't think this is bad. So identifying which values work for an individual and which values work for communally, I think is great. I don't think different communities need to have the same values. I do think they need to respect each other's rights to have those values, to avoid violence as much as possible or infringement on each other. But I think it's important for people to keep different spaces when we talk about large global systems. I don't think that one big system works for everyone. Yeah, I guess that's all I'll say for now. If you guys have any thoughts.
I got feedback on that because I agree. I personally try and work from the bottom up in the way that I engage with systems. So when it comes to a conversation like this, it's almost like picking the colors of a design of a flag that represents the values. So where I'm coming from when I'm talking about like being, when I chose miners as like the dirtiest job I can think of, it's because I think of myself as on a very bottom layer. We could also put this as, well, caretaking changes into a whole different form. But anyways, it's boots on the ground, so to speak, in the military, the bottom layer. That's where I see myself at as participating in my day-to-day life. And so when I'm thinking of these larger systems, I do think of it like designing a flag. And so then my portion of it is, how do we represent these bottom tier boots on the ground, a roofer? If anybody's ever been a roofer in the sun, holy cow, is that a terrible task. So I put myself in that position and think, how does the flag solve this? And so that's more so when I say we in that, like, I'm not even saying like I'm not even the most capable of plumbers or something like that, but I count myself as a we of the plumbers so that I can see myself from that position. So I can see that position considered from even other steps of the hierarchy. So I would like to be able to have a discussion with a knight or with a prince about what it looks like to sort through garbage, even
Right.
as a garbage man. And so that's where I see the convergence of the high skill, and that's where the we comes in as relative to the group of reference, not each individual. I don't know if that lines up, but that's kind of where I was hearing from you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you look at a lot of the current systems, you can see how the bottom doesn't fit into the overarching. I mean, there's just this huge gap between the top and the middle, which is, you know, being decimated systematically, and then the bottom. At least at the moment, maybe we can reverse that direction eventually.
And that's what I see as the laundering. I feel like you named it pretty much exactly. We've chosen violence as a way of money laundering. And so we have a huge amount of these bottom tier individuals not even knowing how the money is disappearing, that's taking out the lifestyles of the middle class around the world and concentrating it into more and more powerful people, creating more and more bottom class to take out more and more of the middle class without them even knowing it, because it's all been laundered away, washed, so they don't see where it's going, and then funneled back up to the top, making an hourglass shape. But the hourglass is getting like more and more disproportional.
Okay, I just wanted to add in too. So the sociosciences, like what Doc referred to earlier. So the psychology and all of the medicine that is in that part of things, that's all an attack on the physical body, and the violence for money laundering is just another form of money laundering that is, yes, attack on the physical body, especially on the emotional body, because that is the fear state, right? And so the fear state that is conditioned inside of us paralyzes us from action to most people, I think. So, and Nahama, what you said about the global scale of things versus a community scale of things. So I wonder if on a global scale, if there's less things that can be agreed upon, but still the same thing all the way around, like something as simple as the philosophy of life instead of a death cult. I see these opposites happening right now, in that we either are continuing a decaying sick society, or we turn the direction and we go to the direction of healthy and living. So fewer things to agree upon, but at least if there's one thing, starting with one thing would be really beneficial for us, and maybe possibly add something else on the top. So the value system, the changing the value of life, the appreciating of being alive, where I think a lot of people, and I've been watching the suicide rates the last so many years, and the increase in suicide rates is really, really, I mean, that just shows that a society that doesn't want to be alive, right? And it's really, really painful, and it spreads that pain through through everyone, through the families, through the community, and so we either increase one side or we increase the other side. So
how about we increase neither side? Um, it's funny because before we got to this conversation, about an hour, maybe an hour and a half ago, when I started the video, the first thing I talked about was group theory of the first order, which is people getting comfortable to have conversations where they disagree but politely work through the entire conversation. And I talked about the group dynamics of groups between 1 and 5 people. I'm working now in the second order, which I consider groups of 5 to 17 people, in building metrics for it. But the third order, I've decided, is going to be a contraction back to small groups. But the small groups are ones where the people are comfortable enough with each other to press differences of opinions and hear each other out. So I want to give a shout to each of you and our entire audience who's been playing in the chat room for really helping me see where it is we're going as we build community from the bottom up. And the real thing is that as an individual human being, no matter what scale you're working on in the hierarchy, you're representing a whole bunch of individual human beings as the we of that order. But everything has to come down to human scale. And if you as an individual don't have a way of vetoing an action because you just don't think it's right, that needs to be included in our basis of self-governance, because nobody should be compelled against their will and not heard for at least reasonable debate. But there's questions in my mind as to what the word reasonably is, and the hierarchy structure has we're going to need some merit measurements to develop what it really is that we appreciate that people do that should push them further in a hierarchy. And forming communities in real life, getting people together on a piece of land and trying to do things together, hasn't worked since I was a child and the hippie movement was trying it. And yet that seems to be the only way that those communities form. But with the internet now, we're forming virtual communities out of the networks between our virtually not alone people who are here because they look around them and they're alone. But none of us are alone. We've all got pets, and we've got continuing supporting cast that will come in and interact with us, so that in our own individual LARP, there are other players in that LARP within our inner circle and within our outer circle. But the idea is that coming together doesn't mean we all have to become like-minded and single-minded. It means we've got to honor each other and where we're coming from. And I think that is the basis of where Wonderland comes from. And so everybody can break their arm patting themselves on the back, and we can continue the conversation knowing that the people who we're going to put in charge of different hierarchies are going to be people who absolutely don't want to be head of a hierarchy and can do the job that they're asked to do. But I don't think people management is going to be a job anymore. Nahama?
So many things. Okay, I think that my personal opinion is that the new hierarchies that will form naturally. I don't see people assigning people roles. I see people embodying values that other people resonate with, and people choosing to perhaps play out those values in a way that they naturally are participating, so that they rise, so to speak, in a hierarchy. But yeah, what what Alice, what you were saying about the common thing, for me, that's agreeing to disagree. One of my things of anybody who I talk with, like, that's the one value that I want people who interact with me to share, is that at baseline we agree to disagree. I don't care on what, but whatever we disagree on, that shouldn't be a problem, generally speaking, unless that's a person who wishes to harm me, and I'm going to do more than disagree with that. I'm going to beat them out the window. But metaphorically in Minecraft. Yeah, I mean, look, like, there's so much with this conversation that I don't agree with. That's not necessarily a problem. It has to do with the fact that we're talking about systems and top down, like I said before. I also have a difficult time when something is not practical or tangible. So when I have a conversation, it's challenging for me to I feel like I'm making this about myself. This is the most challenging conversation we've had in Wonderland for me so far.
I think it's okay to express the challenges of the conversation. I do think it's a challenging conversation overall, and it's interesting that it's gone this direction from Jubilee. But I'm enjoying it still in this. And somebody made a really good comment, I thought, down on the chats, that they said that they don't think that parasitism or predation are able to be baked out of the system. That's something inherent that some members of the species, regardless of the situation, this is how I took it, are going to demonstrate that skill set as their way to survive. And on to address that by going back to the values that lead to incentives. Right now, our value system incentivizes that parasitism and predation, and it's going to tie it back to what you said too about violence being the ultimate money launderer in the society. I want to make sure to clarify that it's not just physical violence. The mental and emotional violence that Hollyweird has put on blast, and all the psychological, social, the spiritual warfare that the super mega churches and other things of the like have put onto people, and a whole bunch of different examples. I'm not calling out anybody in specific, but that I personally don't believe, Nahama was saying, like, if people do what they choose naturally, I don't think you have to get rid of the parasites and the predators. I don't think that's how it works. That getting rid of fundamentally undermines that agree to disagree. Now, disincentivizing it as a culture as a whole, or removing the incentive, like the way that we have the incentive set up right now, you're foolish not to be a parasite and a predator, because that's how you get ahead. Like, that's how the whole thing works. But in a more natural choice system, like Nahama was presenting, I see encouraging sheepdogs that are really good sheepdogs as a way of keeping away the wolves, as opposed to trying to eliminate wolves. Not going on a wolf hunt. You know what I mean? Like, get better sheepdogs. Like, incentivize better sheepdogs. Because once you go on the wolf hunt, now the wolves have a reason to hunt back. Now we're right back into that same war. And this lends to like what Doc was saying about the like that there's still a need for defense, even though you would hope that there would never be any use of offense. And that's that concept of that sheepdog that keeps the wolves at bay, but doesn't go out to hunt the wolves. And I think that that metaphor, so to speak, could be applied in so many different areas. Like I think parents are showing their ability to do that right now, currently, by taking their kids out of the school system and homeschooling them, because the school system has become a wolf. It's become a predator. It's terrible. Um, sorry. And so they're acting as sheepdogs by protecting their kids from the wolves that are the school system. And I think you can apply that situation on now when it comes to parasites. Parasites is an interesting concept. My favorite example to use is I'm a whale. My parasites, they just clean me. They just they pick up the scraps of I'm a big floppy whale. I like to do big motions and I leave things scattered behind me and the parasites pick them up. To me, it doesn't seem, as long as you don't incentivize parasitism to the point where it overwhelms the host, then again, I don't see a problem. Strengthen the host and the parasite's not a problem. The whale doesn't worry about the fish suckling on its armpit. Now, it can get to the point where a whale can become so dominated by barnacles that it restricts its movement to a further degree that makes it more coated by barnacles that eventually will overwhelm the host. But the solution to that is to build a stronger host, like have healing opportunities for the host, and then the host doesn't get overwhelmed by the parasites. It's a naturally balancing problem again. So, but I thought that was a really good comment because it addresses another bottom layer of that eventual hierarchy that can still be addressed within the system of agree to disagree and value life inherently. I think
I like that.
we've come up with two.
Yeah, I think that's very realistic because yes, parasitism is part of the natural order of things, but elevating parasites to the top is not natural, and that's generally manufactured. And then, like in the online space, that's definitely manufactured. Yeah, go ahead, Max.
To me, it certainly violates autonomy. If you put, by definition, if you elevate a parasite to the top, is to replace the position of the host, and so it's violated autonomy, and that ceases to be within the value of life itself. Like the only examples I can think of that happening are like when the like whatever type of like wasp, I think, like crawls into a slug or something and makes it drive itself into a lake, and so that it can birth more loss. It's like the only examples of that are completely violent attacks of taking over the host that I can think of in nature. And so within a single species, I can't think, that doesn't even make sense to me. So yeah, the elevating parasites to the top is exactly what we've done. The more you can take from other people, the more valuable you are. And
Like
there's
the
something
UN.
about that violates a principle.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Recently, Elon Musk said something about a collective nervous system, how he's able to feel a collective nervous system throughout Twitter, and how the mind then advances in a way. So imagine a singular nervous system, right? And the response from it with fear and it regulating itself basically, right? So and I think that there's also a collective heart then, if there's a collective nervous system. So if we can think about the microscopic scale to the macroscopic scale of the organs functioning in the body. Okay, I have a poem kind of on this that connects them, but then I wanted to also bring in just the topic of, Max said something that reminded me of who is protecting that? Are we protecting that on an individual level? And this is a place where there's groups talking about the masculinity, masculinity and femininity, both of them. Okay, and why are women more masculine? People ask. It's because they don't feel protected and they feel like they need to protect themselves. This didn't happen instantly. This has been a very gradual process through time. And so that's just one of the many balancing scales on a society level that you see the effects of. So, okay, one more thought here is that I was thinking about the cells of the body again and the cancer, right? And the cancer takes over the cancer is in the cells already. It's just a matter of it taking over the cells, kind of the parasitic, right? A parasite taking over a cell. So then I started thinking about we already are, I think, the cancer to the system. We're viewed as an infection or a parasite to the parasite, to the
parasites are seeing us as parasite. Yeah, it's an
yeah. Okay.
Who we perceive as the parasites perceive us as the parasites. That's pretty inharmonious.
I had a clarifying thought about this thing, and so the parallel between the predators using the sheepdogs, that works. Get better sheepdogs. So with parasites, when it comes to humans, having it be a circle like that, maybe the answer is to get better shamans, because maybe the answer to parasites eating each other's tail is a shaman that can like wield a Hadusius that allows the snakes to spiral instead of get stuck in a constant loop, and then maybe they can grow together. Maybe the solution to over concentration of parasites amongst a host that can handle it, but is being inhibited by it, would be better shamans.
It's interesting that you bring up shamanic values. I've had the opportunity to run with several shamans when I was in my hermit times, because the places you could go as an individual and have the time to spend outside of the system time, hermits can make that time if they wish, and most shamans tend to be hermits. And after working in close proximity with several of these people, I find that most of them are insufferable to be with, and that's why they turn into hermithood. And so, having spent many years as a hermit not dealing with people, I find that it would be easy to blame myself for idiosyncrasies and quirks, but it allows me also to have such a different perspective on the trials and travails of humanity that I thought I could do some good while I believed the system was organized for that purpose. But the system is organized to the point where it creates chaos. And I am personally organized to where I feed on chaos and make better order out of higher degrees of chaos. And so, with my theory of time, coming together at this level and having this conversation now is only a function of higher order time narratives, and that lower order time narratives would never allow us to group together in such a way that we could focus on what the problems of the whole society are. And I think that if we can organize an approach to solving problems that looks from different perspectives at benefits and detractions from proposed methods of doing things, I believe that when we get to the level of community, people will be empowered to just do things, and that we will get so much creativity that will jump a couple of orders. But order is just a measure of quantitation, and I want to find measures of measuring quality based on our value system that we're creating, so that the rewards that we have go to the individuals who are providing what meets our criteria of value, which isn't set because each of us individually has different things they do value. And so it's a continuing conversation that will need to happen. Alice, you look like you have something really important to say.
Well, no, I'm just thinking of what Matt said earlier about what makes a better shaman, right? I'm thinking about this changing the mind, right? The weed garden, picking the weeds and allowing the good fruit to grow, right? So this is the message behind all of my poetry, because it does take the inner work, the changes of our words that we use, because deciding where we are in the world, if we're still in the old world, or if we are 1 foot in the old world and 1 foot in the new world, and when can we transition, or some people already have, to the new world with both feet in the new world. So when you are changing your position, your words change because your past, present, future changes. And accepting that reality and then making the changes in you from your thoughts, from your words, from your actions. This is the biggest challenge that I see in people's psychology as they transition. Like they think that they're somewhere, but their words are still the same as they used to use in the past.
And that process of self-reflection is extremely challenging, and that's where like the communal nature, being able to have conversations where you can agree to disagree, can be that like reflective principle that allows you to measure growth internally, but also internally as it relates to what you're looking for socially with other people. Help control those words. I want to make sure that, like, when I use the term shamanism, I think of shamanism kind of like how Doc was saying earlier, like chemistry is considered an evolution of alchemy, but I don't see it that way. I see alchemy as like a greater field, and chemistry just being a part of it. So shamanism, I just consider the field of healing, and so doctors would just be one. Surgeons would be underneath the umbrella of shamanism. I just want to clarify because that word can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And
in
Doc,
fact,
one
it
second
does
here.
mean something different. Go ahead.
Yeah, it does mean a lot of different things to different people. But I have a hard stop coming up in 5 minutes, and it's 11:11 Pacific Standard Time, and so I wanted to make a wish for internally, for us to experience our own spirit of Jubilee, in the sense that we could have that spirit of forgiveness for the debts, for the debts that have been accrued upon us, have that, give anyone that we've taken into slavery back to their position of freedom. Any land that we've used, give it back to the purpose that it was intended for. Anything that we've taken adverse possession of, let it go. And that would be the spirit of Jubilee internally, the way that I see it specifically.
Now you have to explain that to my cats because they feel ownership over me. And so it isn't
I
a
would
matter.
never dare ask a cat to have a spirit of Jubilee. That's way above my pay grade.
Yeah, it's like trying to herd them. But I got a new cat scratch post that's 3 levels that they can lay on carpeted, and they've figured out the top level. They haven't gotten to the bottom 2 levels yet, but I think that's because they both like to be as high as possible to check out what's going on in the room. Of course, I also like to be as high as possible. It is time for a hard stop. We've been at this for almost 2 hours, or at least I have. And I want to thank you again because I think we got worked out that Jubilee really means something different to every different person who uses the word, and that there are so many triggers bundled up in that word that people calling something a Jubilee and having no reference to any biblical tale at all have influenced the picture of what the basic human in the US thinks about different things. And the mind wash is just incredible. We need Grizz's saving throws here, but alas, they're Grizz's saving throws. But thank you, Grizz. Jubilee is a mutant that shoots fireworks. Ooh, I could see running into that in a different dungeon. Everybody, let's go around once with some quick goodbyes, and then I'll say the final word and close her off. Shall we start with Neshama?
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't start with me.
We can start with me because I literally only have 2 minutes left. And so I'll say that this has been the definitely the most or the least fanciful Wonderland, or perhaps the most, which is an interesting juxtaposition there because it either included the least magic or the most magic, depending on how you, the least imagination or the most imagination. That's what I meant, because it either takes huge amount of imagination to imagine that any of these hierarchies are even effective, or it takes no imagination, or it takes a ability to set aside imagination to come up with principles that actually do work. So I think it's been a really interesting juxtaposition of wonderment.
Well, I did wonder where we were going to take it, and it's an interesting place. Alice, would you like to go ahead?
I'm just going to share the last line of my quintet. To cast a spell over everyone, right? So that we can hope this on us. And it goes like this. Accessing perpetual state. Bliss, wonder, grace.
All right, Neshama, your turn. You're muted.
Thanks, Doc. I just want to thank you, Doc, for the space today. And it was lovely to see everyone.
Awesome. It was great to have you here. And I think that now what we're going to do is get everybody thinking about creating the frequency of their own personal space that fits the realm of where they want to be. Because when you get into small groups like the ones we were just in, the resonant frequency is much deeper than groups where people don't feel free to say what's on their mind. And we're going to have to learn how to have these conversations at all different levels of the hierarchy without excluding anyone. But we have some ways of doing that. And the new way is to take everything we thought we knew and weigh it again. And of course, when I go to hit the tab, it disappears and does something different. I don't know. I got into a space where I can't post my new way. Oh well. It's Conversations with Time, and we have been talking to Nishama, Alice, and Max. You all have a great day, and we'll see you again soon.